You segued that very well into the question which I wanted to ask, which is about treatments now.
Yep.
So you're looking for all these biomarkers. Some
Yep.
have not been studied at all. Some you have some indication of, like the saliva and blood, as you said. Um, but what does this mean for treatments? Because I still feel that it's very hard to treat something internal inside the brain. So yeah, what does it mean for rehab and treatment?
That's a very good question. And I guess you can think of it as like different, you have different, I guess, phenotypes of concussion. And like I said before, it's based off the different systems that are impacted. And a lot of the time, multiple systems are impacted. Um, and like things like with issues with cerebral blood flow, that's usually you have, I guess, more of a headache phenotype where the main, I guess, symptom is headache. So if we sort of, the idea is that if we find sort of um, these, I guess, deficits in cerebral blood flow, for example, then we can sort of, that A sort of can explain or help explain certain symptoms, but then B, we can sort of, treatment can be based off what people are feeling. So if we do find deficits in physiological biomarkers, it's like, okay, we know this person is sort of not right 100%. We shouldn't rush them into returning to sport, returning to their normal daily functioning. And then again, it's important that treatment is sort of, I think people get the idea is like when you get concussed, you should just rest completely. And I fully agree. Like for the first, that acute period, you should be, resting completely and have, I guess, a little stimulation. But it's important to, I guess, expose people to certain things that sort of can trigger symptoms, not to a point where they're, you know, debilitated. And, we're not going to, not debilitated, but to a certain extent, right? Because that sort of exposure to doing certain things will actually improve. For example, exercise, like it's important that people actually exercise gradually and to the right level. But one of the main, I guess, phenotypes or um, types of concussion is anxiety, and that's essentially this increase or overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, and that causes people to be in this like sort of fight flight um, state where I guess that's why they have trouble concentrating, things like that. They're sort of, I guess, not their normal selves. They sort of have this, high level of cortisol, and they're always kind of in this stress state. And things like exercise, which actually activates the parasympathetic nervous system, helps with that. So I think, again, this could be a misconception that doing exercise um, is bad, but it's actually good in introducing it earlier and in the right ways. Obviously, you don't want to sort of overexert that, but doing it in the right ways, gradually, the right sort of exercise actually helps with that sort of that balance between the two branches of the autonomic nervous system. So I think like identifying certain where there are certain deficits in someone's physiology, just sort of says, well, identifies that, um, okay, this person is not right physiologically. We shouldn't rush them into certain things, but could identify more specific stuff like, I guess, doing things or introducing exercise that might be more specific. Say if they've got a lot of vestibular problems, sort of doing exercise that sort of challenges that system. And then from then it can actually learn and get better and improve. Um, and I guess that's sort of more specific targeted treatment that ideally would um, help people recover and recover better. So it's not about actually like not using certain systems that are sort of impaired or decompromised. It's actually challenging them to a certain level that actually helps them and helps the individual. And like I said, the things like exercise, when it's introduced earlier, it's people have better outcomes overall.
That's super interesting. I'm just going to go back over some of the points that stood out.
Yep.
The correlation between anxiety and concussion. I think that's
Mm.
that's super interesting. And I really like that, you know, there's that really fine balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, right? Where you know, the anxiety is correlated with kind of concussion. Not doing exercise is pushed for kind of within concussion, or that, you know, when you think about concussion coming from someone who doesn't do concussion studies, it's like, okay, you have to rest. Like you shouldn't be doing any type of exercise, right? As you said, but finding that balance and actually doing a little bit of exercise in the right way counteract that anxiety, which will make you feel better. Like that's, I mean, it sounds simple when you said it perfectly, but actually in hindsight, it's, yeah, I just think that's really cool stuff that you're doing, and the research that you're doing is great.
Yeah, it's yeah. I think I'm quite passionate about it, obviously, but I think it's really important, especially as like, well, not really doing any team sports at the moment, but like having experienced a few concussions myself and teammates, and I think mental health is a massive thing, as well, especially for athletes, and you know, knowing that they can't do what they love to do all the time. It's sort of like that mental health is sort of impacts them a lot when you're concussed and they can't do anything. So I guess it's sort of understanding that, you know, being like having a concussion actually impairs that, and it's sort of why saying, I guess, gradually to exercise and stuff, it's quite positive for them, but also to know that to not rush into it, and it's really like refreshing to hear. Like I've had a few. Obviously, I love to chat to the patients and say if they're. I've had a few say like, I'm just gonna make sure that I'm actually feeling okay and stuff. I'm not gonna rush into sport. It's really refreshing to hear that, and I think that awareness is finally getting to people. I guess, well, getting across, right, that it's important, because otherwise, if you don't have the right recovery, these athletes their careers are just going to end sooner than expected. So it's really important to consider that mental health, and that the anxiety that they might be feeling, or stress or things like that, actually has a physiological, I guess, mechanism as well, not just sort of, yeah, I guess their mental state. So it's sort of good to objectify things, but also important to have your subjective. Yeah, I'm a bit biased, can you tell? But
Yeah, no, it's
yeah,
not
it's
just,
really
it's
important
not,
to consider that.
yeah, yeah, and it's not just a case of, oh, I'm not playing the sport which I'm really passionate about, so that's causing, you know, that is causing me to feel anxious, you know, thinking about when I'm going to get back into the sport, if this kind of you know, changes the projection of my career. It's actually more of a, if you've been concussed, it's not just that, it's actually the physiological things going on in your brain related to that concussion is contributing to that feeling. So it's I mean, I feel like that just puts an emphasis on the importance of your research, and how, you know, concussion shouldn't just be concussion. There's so many trickle down effects that it has on your mental state, your physiological state. Like that just pushes the importance of the research that you're doing, for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I said, it's just really really important just to have that, like, I guess, basic understanding of what
Yeah.
the injury actually is, and that it's okay to feel certain ways, even if you feel slightly off. It's fine. It's okay. It's just sort of, and that people will get better as well, I think. Yeah, for sure.
I quite enjoyed the specificity part of it for your treatments, because I'm thinking back to when I had a couple pretty big concussions, and I remember sort of, because at the same time I was studying at the same time, and I had some exams coming up or something, and uh, I remember them during my rehab process, them trying to get me to get back into focus of being able to study and read a research paper. So it was first like, okay, read this paragraph, explain it. A few days later, trying to push me a bit more, then trying to push me a bit more by giving me a research paper to read. And it's that same kind of exercise for the thing, but um, based on what I needed. So we're not just talking about physical exercise. I guess treatment wise, we're
mental
talking about
exercise.
like working your brain in whichever way is needed, but also like increasing it slowly.
Yeah,
And
and
with
doing it enough to actually for it to be sensitive enough to, I guess, for you to learn as well, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
want to be pushed and challenged, whether it's physically, whether it's mentally. It's you still need the right sort of intensity of stimulus to not overexert you, but also just to challenge your brain to actually learn these things. And okay, like that's how I should function, and just sort of incrementally get better.
Y-
Hopefully,
yeah,
after.
and then the
Sorry,
subjective aspect of like whoever was working with the people at rehab were basically being like, okay, you are a master's student, so you were able to read so many research papers in a day, so we need to get you to that point. Until then, we don't think that you're ready. So
yeah,
um
Yeah.
so then like I remember them following up like a month or so later being like, okay, how many papers can you read now in a day? I was like, don't ask me this. But
Yeah.
I
fantastic
get the idea.
measure.
Yeah, but it's a good idea, right? Being because you want to get anybody who's had a concussion, get them back to whatever standard they were performing at before. And now having sort of like biomarkers which you can also look at to be like, okay, they're feeling okay, but actually there's still this little bit left to go.
Yeah.
I think is a very big thing.
Because
Um,
yeah, a lot of the time, like I experienced this when I've had concussions in the past. Like I might be feeling fine, I might really not have a headache or feel nauseous or dizziness or anything of like I guess the typical symptoms, but I just might be feeling a bit off, might not be able to concentrate for as long, um, things like that. And yeah, that can be quite subjective. That actually is telling that's your body telling you something that you're not quite that you don't quite have the sufficient energy to sort of do things. And yeah, I've talked a lot about sport, and obviously a lot of concussions happen in sport, but just like work, just going to the supermarket, doing daily tasks can be quite challenging for people with concussions, like just sort of that overstimulation and can trigger these different systems that aren't getting like sufficient energy supply. Um, so, like you said, it could be applied to anything.
yeah. No,